Pressbox, what inspired the journey until it got acquired by Procter and Gamble?
I went all in. I was lucky. I had $120,000 saved up. We used this crazy thing called cash flow to grow. We grew after 5 years to 1,200 locations, 10 cities, and then in 2018 got the attention of Procter and Gamble and sold to them.
Behind 81 collection, what was the founding story?
What fills me up the most in life are all the jobs we created. We were able to move people from lower class into middle class. A lot of it comes down to a lot of people feeling left out of the greatest economic period in global history. It's important we invest in these neglected industries, lift them up, and that will have a systemic impact across the communities they operate in and everything that's affiliated.
What interests you about India?
At the end of the day, I realized that I'm so fortunate to have this position of strength and luck. It didn't just come from nowhere. It came from a lot of sacrifice. Ultimately, I'm always Indian. I think about the next 100 years. There is a material chance that my grandkids are going back to India, right? And you think about the potential there and obviously all the amazing infrastructure that's going on there, etc. We have the responsibility to pay it forward for future generations that are coming out of India.
Today we had Vijen Patel. Vijen Patel is the founder of the 81 Collection, a VC fund that invests in unsexy industries. Before that, Vijen founded Pressbox, a dry cleaning startup, in 2013 and sold it to Procter and Gamble in 2018. During our conversation, we covered his early life, his journey with Pressbox, the 81 Collection, a fund he considers his life's work, the impact India has had on him, role Indian diasporas can play in India's growth, and much more. Now I bring you Vijen. Vijen, so good to have you on the pod. Finally, I'm excited for this conversation.
I'm excited to be here. It's been months in the making, so thank you for your patience.
Absolutely, it was worth it. And Vijen, you know, a good starting point can be we're really a byproduct of our environment. Uh, what shaped you the most while growing up?
I think everything's nature and nurture. And so, I feel so fortunate to be Indian. Mom was born in Uganda, in Kampala, ended up being raised in London. Dad was born in Pune. Um, and so ultimately, they had both significant drive to end up in America. Dad's a physician, mom was a biochemist. But ultimately, it's also such a blessing to be a part of the American education system and just American culture. And, there's a certain risk taping that's part of this culture that's unique to, my family didn't really have it.
Mhm.
And I come up from an entire family of physicians. So I am the first person in my family who's not a physician. And so clearly some part of that has to be attributable to the risk taking nature in America.
Got it. So you are the first person in the family who's not a physician. How did you get into the world of technology?
Yeah. And I still don't know if I'm a technologist, which I think is what makes me special. But so I went to school in the Midwest, and I actually wanted to be a math major. Or I went to be a math major. I wanted to be an actuary. And while I did that, there was no actuarial science program. And so my first entrepreneurship venture was actually to start the Actuarial Science Club. Uh, and in doing that, I actually realized I didn't want to be an actuary, but I really enjoyed bringing people together, thinking about the world. And so that then led me into finance. And, it's funny, we talk about this nature and nurture and generally my background. What ended up happening is I went down a very conservative career path. I worked at McKinsey for a few years. I did McKinsey in New York, London, South Africa, and then I did private equity. And then and only at that juncture did I notice that, hey, like I do not belong in front of a computer, whether it's actuarial science or private equity. I need to be with people creating, putting together a team to take on the world. And so ultimately that was the drive. It was like, as a kid, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I did it in college, and I kind of pushed down that desire. And ultimately I was like, all right, I need to go do this in 2013. So I haven't once said technology. It was more about, I think, my desire to crave autonomy and to create impact.
Mhm.
That's really the underlying force. And obviously, if you're trying to have impact and catalyze change, it's hard to do that without technology.
Got it. So, Vijay, maybe we can, dive into, Pressbox.
Yeah.
Uh, how did it, came to be? What inspired you, and maybe the journey until it got acquired by Procter and Gamble?
Yes. So it was 2013, and ultimately we had this vision, right? And I am fortunate. I came from private equity, and so around the consumer and retail world, we were pretty aware that if a vertical within retail had no technology, no branding, and a lot of fragmentation, those three things, right? No branding, a lot of fragmentation, no technology. It usually signaled disruption. It meant something commoditized. And And so, what were the certain verticals around that time? Right, taxis is a great one. Right, all the taxi cabs are commoditized, no brand, no technology. Uh, and the key, as Uber and Lyft figured it out, was to actually recreate a new supply and distribution method. So the reason why it won Uber and Lyft is because they took on the medallion system. And so then, as I looked at other verticals within retail, I noticed that dry cleaning also fit that criteria. And so similarly, how are we going to take on dry cleaning? We would have to take a new supplier distribution method. And so in 2013, we had this idea to recreate a dry cleaner with the combination of software and hardware. So hardware was going to recreate a storefront. Software was going to recreate the conversation you have with a dry cleaner. And this is when it gets fun. We moved back home to Chicago. I was in San Francisco, wanted to come back here. And I talked to, there were like 5 VCs here at the time, I think around that. And they all said, Vijen, you're great, but this sounds hard. And so I had enough conviction and confidence. We did all the work. I underwrote it. I saw the unit economics, and it was going to translate into really strong unit economics. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to put all my money into it. And I've got one life to live. I'll believe in myself. And so I went all in. I was lucky. I had $120,000 saved up, went all in. And next thing you knew, we used this crazy thing called cash flow to grow. We grew after 5 years to 1,200 locations, Shiva. 1,200 locations, 10 cities. And then in 2018, got the attention of Procter and Gamble and sold to them. And so we can go more into that detail of the story, but at a high level, that's exactly what we did.
Mhm. Gotcha. And Vijayan, post that, you founded 81 Collection, and look, the tagline and the thesis is very clear. We are a fund that is looking to back unsexy businesses, and seems like it comes from your own experiences and partners and people who have funded 81 Collection. Maybe let's talk about the inspiration behind 81 Collection. What was the founding story?
Yeah, for sure. So after a couple years, I ran what's now called Tide Cleaners, a couple years nationally, and it was a great experience. And then I took 2 years off, and I think it's when you and I met. But I opened up my family office. I was able to start deploying capital, uh, and it was a great time to deploy. Uh, but what I noticed was that the same story I faced a decade ago has not changed. And in fact, everyone's still looking for an asset light, employee light, cloud based unicorn. And it makes sense. Again, it's a very profitable way to build a business, but there are multiple ways to build a business. And ultimately, I noticed that it's still, if anything, it's gotten more crowded. And I actually think we may actually be approaching a tipping point of software, where software is great. We've created a lot of efficiency, opened up a lot of supply and demand, but we are soon reaching a tipping point. And and then I realized, as I looked within, not just did I miss investing, which was my first part of my career, and I love entrepreneurship. But Shiva, actually, what fills me up the most in life are all the jobs we created. And what I mean by that is because we took on, because we bootstrap, we could only afford to pay people 15, 20, $25 an hour as they started. But as the business grew, as our earnings grew, we could pay people more. And so all of a sudden, people that were on a career path of making hourly wages started taking home 50K, 75K, 100K. And slowly and surely, as we saw, as I went to my employees' weddings, I saw them buy homes and even start their own businesses. I noticed, we were able to move people from lower class into middle class. And that was the last aha. It was effectively like, not, from a demand side, these industries are not really funded. They're hard. But on the supply side of the worthiness of these companies, not just are they good companies if you have a long-term horizon, but they're also the right kind of companies. And you think, about what's going on right now in America, right? There's a lot of divisiveness. There's a lot of the hollowing of the middle class and a lack of shared common ground. And I actually think deep down, a lot of it comes down to a lot of people feeling left out of the greatest economic period in global history. And the profits are going to a few people. And I think it's important we invest in these neglected industries, lift them up, and that will have a systemic impact across the communities they operate in, and all the vendors and the contractors and everything that's affiliated.
Mhm. Gotcha. Maybe let's talk more about the thesis of 81 collection. What kind of companies you invest in, what kind of check sizes
Yeah,
do you write?
for sure. So we raised in 2022, absolutely horrible time to raise,
Mhm.
but we were so honored. We ended up raising about $41 million in less than 6 months. We actually could have raised more, but we wanted to hard cap it to stay small.
Mhm.
And the reason why is, this, but the smaller you are, the better the chance you have for greater returns. And as we are starting, we want to make sure we checked our ego and started to deliver good performance. Uh, in terms of what we're looking for, effectively, as builders, what we all heard was that, our industries are too low margin, we were too capital intensive, and too difficult to scale. Okay, those three things. What's funny is that with a longer term horizon, all three of those things, Shiva, become competitive advantages, right? Effectively, the low growth, higher durable cash flow nature turns into uh, elasticity or inelasticity, right? Just like higher quality revenue, stickier revenue that's tied to customers' habits.
Mhm.
The capital intensity turns into a moat, right? So now we've got these 1,200, actually, Tide Cleaners, we have 2,000 locations around the US, many bolted into the walls of America, storefronts. Like, there's no amount of VC money that can take that away.
Mhm.
Uh, and then the last part is really around that low margin structure. But effectively, we have this take where, a lot of these industries, classically 15, 20% margin, you see it right now with AI, right? But AI, I'm sure you've seen this in India, but the amount of accounting roll-ups or revenue cycle management. But the reason why this is interesting is because ultimately these industries in these lower margin areas are just a bunch of clicks on a button, right? You're clicking buttons, and at some point, AI will see that and say, "Hey, we can do that," and that will lift the margin structure. And so ultimately, we think this is going to be the next epic of innovation. It's going to take a long time, but we're excited to be ahead of it. So again, that's how we think about the world.
Yeah.
There's these industry structures that will be unknot over the following 15, 20 years.
Mhm. Gotcha. No, you're right. I mean, these industries, they're hard industry. That's why they're called hard
Yeah.
industries. And once they start working, there's no stopping. There's a massive, massive moat around it. Vijay, maybe we can pick few portfolio companies for the audience to understand. What kind of like how do these companies look like? And
Yeah, for
for
sure.
your portfolio companies, what was the thesis for you to invest in them?
Yeah. And also, we talked about check sizes. We write to start off about $1 million into the company. We reserve another 1.5 million. what we strongly believe in is alignment with entrepreneurs. Founder Collective does a good job of this in the US, but we like to, after the early stage, we like to sit on the side of the founders. And the reason why is that many of these companies will not have, IPO exits or billion-dollar exits, but they're very likely to have a strategic exit or a PE exit. And so if you're capital efficient, you can generate venture returns. In terms of a couple companies, we have a lot of good ones right now. I'll talk about two of the latest ones we've done.
Yeah.
One is a company in the packaging space. So this one's really interesting. This one's actually already doing 24 million in revenue, a million EBITDA. We invested at an attractive valuation that'd be like in between a pre-seed and a seed in the US. But what's interesting about it is there's two giant trends in the US colliding. One is shipping, right? Everyone wants something at their front door. I'm sure right now outside, I've got some package outside my front door. But the other part is we have one Earth, right? And ultimately, a lot of this packaging is left in landfills, and we can't keep growing both of these trends and expect nothing to change. This company, it's called Eco Enclose. They have spent the last 8 years studying the supply chain of compostable packaging. It sounds simple, but if you were to buy a bag of beans, you think that that packaging is probably like one piece of equipment that's tied together at the top.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually about 15 components. And so
Yeah.
if you're trying to find something biodegradable, whether it's a matte finish or the resin and the adhesive, the label, it's really hard to do that. And effectively, they have built that expertise. And so we're excited about obviously getting our hands dirty with the business, showing, paying forward all the lessons we've learned, but ultimately actually adding technology and visibility into the supply chain so they can effectively get way better procurement of supplies to meet all of their customers' demands. These sorts of industries, Shiva, it's a great example, is an industry that's like stuck in the 80s, right? Yeah. It just hasn't had innovation, but we need to push beyond to solve some real issues. Mm-hmm. The other company, I think it's a completely different one, but it's interesting, is in home services. We've looked at about 70 home services companies, and this is quite similar to dry cleaning, right? It's fragmented, void of technology, and lacking of branding. And so we backed a company in Houston called Goodsmith. They're doing about 4 million in revenue, about break even. What they do that's really interesting relative to the Angies or the Craigslist or any of those folks is you actually pay $40 a month to get access to very high quality labor. And all of these folks are on the payroll. Mm-hmm. And because of that unlock of high quality labor, which is really hard to get right now because there's huge labor shortages in the US with especially skilled trades, they're able to have outstanding performance for their customers. And so they come back 9 to 10 times per year. Each of these technicians, the average spend per customer is around $10,000. And so what we're excited about here is that, in this venture world, everyone works on growth. But for a lot of these industries, it's all about quality. Because ultimately, if you nail the quality, you'll always have this tension between quality and scaling. And ultimately, right, if you scale, you'll start seeing a detriment in quality. But what we look for early on is actually high quality. Because then on top of that, then you can do the scale stuff. The quality is really hard. And so we think this company is at the precipice of nailing their quality standards and soon being able to scale it. And so obviously we're working with them, but two different worlds, packaging and home services, but you'll start to see trends that kind of rhyme.
Gotcha. We have this one company in India called Urban Company, home services. There were a lot of companies in India solving for home services. And Urban Company was able to just build deep trust with the people, mostly because of the quality of work their partners were doing.
Yeah.
And now, of course, it took them almost a decade. Now they're just growing. They've recently become profitable. They're over 100 mil. And now they've started selling products like RO and ACs and other because they already have that trust.
It's 100% right. Like, people don't realize it, but the first 5 years of these companies really suck. But if you get to that juncture, right, and you construct this flywheel, it's kind of gravy thereafter because you've done the hard work.
Yeah.
And so, like, to elaborate on that, so Tide Cleaners, we have, right, 2,004 locations. Traditionally dry cleaning's 15% margin industry. We grew it to 50% gross margin. We're soon going to have an automated plant. And that
Hmm.
means we'll soon operate at 80% margins, 24/7 around the clock. Kind of sounds like software, right? But it's a dry cleaner. It just took us 10 years to get there, but we finally got there. The key is that we were patient.
Hmm. Gotcha. And Vijen, you've been investing through the fund
Yeah.
for almost, 2+ years. What's something you know now you wish you knew earlier about investing?
We're very people focused. Ultimately, I think a lot of that comes from self reflection on, I don't think I could have picked a worse market than dry cleaning. It's so hard. It's not big. You're going after a lot of mom and pops. It's a really hard market, but ultimately, we think we just executed. And so a lot of our diligence, and we go pretty deep, it's about tradition was around 90% on team, especially at these early stages. That's all you have. And, you talk to Sequoia, they're 100% people at this stage.
Mhm.
Uh, but there's a couple times I've noticed where you can't, that doesn't mean the business model can't check. You have to still have some sense of a business model. And so we, if we've made and we've only made two situations in which I'd probably take back the checks, but both of them, I actually don't know if I would, because I think time's still on our side, and the team can pull something out. But I think ultimately, I wish we spent a little bit more time flushing out the business model, especially in the early stage, and it can maneuver a lot. But
Mhm.
I will say on the other side, because of that strength in people, Shiva, we've been
Yeah.
rewarded so many times, right? Because ultimately, there's a couple companies where I thought, oh, this is not going to work. And then, the next thing you know, they pull out a magic trick and they close an Amazon contract worth $150 million. And you're like, what? Where did that come from? And so ultimately, at the end of the day, amazing people can change the world. And so that's the core focus, but it's important that the business model does make sense as well.
Yeah, gotcha. Before we press the record button, you mentioned that you're just loving what you're doing. Maybe let's double click on that, Vijay. Why 81 collection is giving you a lot of energy and
Yeah.
fun?
Yeah. It's a good question. You know, there's a lot of moments in life where you're doing your own thing and you doubt yourself. And yeah, we didn't even get to this, but when I told my mom I was going to start a dry cleaner and leave private equity, she cried. She tried to talk to all of my family to get me to stop it. Which, by the way, she now doesn't remember that conversation. But what's funny as I say that is that at some point you realize you have to go your own way. And what's exciting at this juncture is, now I'm fortunate, you can't see it, I've got a lot of gray hairs, but I have 20 years of experience. 10 years as an entrepreneur, as a bootstrap dry cleaner, and 10 years as an investor. And then this soulful purpose for job creation and to help, play a role in rebuilding the middle class. And now what's exciting is that the convergence of those three things, a decade of bootstrap entrepreneur, a decade of investing, and job creation. It took me 20 years to get here, but I think I can finally say that I'm uniquely qualified to pursue this strategy. And I would never have been able to say that earlier, right? A lot of people can be an entrepreneur. A lot of people can be investors. But I think for this strategy specifically, I think there's only a handful of people that can do that. And it's really exciting because everything looks clear, and it looks clearer than ever before. And to be clear, it looks different. But because of my, unique life experience, I see the world pretty clearly. And I think this is an opportunity that's worth fixing. And so, and to be clear, I'm so fortunate to come from this from a place of purpose, right? And I took 2 years off to really assess what I want in life, and this will be my last job. And so with that lens, I'm going to work on this for 40, 50 years, Shiva. We can do more podcasts. Uh, but what's exciting is that with that clock and that horizon, there's no immediacy. I want to do this. This is my craft. I want to work on it, assemble an incredible team around us. And ultimately, it's my life mission. So I feel blessed to have come to this point in my life. I wouldn't have come here without 20 years of just like grinding.
Yeah.
But now that I'm here, I can say unequivocally that I think we're uniquely positioned to like play this role in the world.
Yeah, I'm genuinely so happy for you, Vijen. Given you're able to do what you love doing and really, able to figure out your life's
Yeah.
work, life's mission, and Vijen doing anything uh, at a massive scale or something that's ambitious. That I mean, it's not easy, right? That's why it's hard and it's ambitious. What's been the hardest part for you around building 81 collections?
It's the same thing as building a company, but at the end of the day, there's so much noise and there's so much input. I mean, you just have to go on Twitter for 7 minutes for someone to call you stupid, right? Like, you know, there are so many markups we're going to miss on. We're going to miss on so many, companies that are AI this and AI that, and that's fine. But ultimately, it's going to withstand. The hardest part for us is going to be the discipline to stay the course. And I actually was just at a conference this week, but uh, if you look at the 50 richest families, Shiva, on earth, their average holding period for their business was 44 years. And so you can imagine the first 4 or 5 years, people are like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? Uh, and and ultimately, if you're trying to go the other way, you're going to have people that are going to call you stupid, or it's going to feel lonely. And so ultimately, I think with venture, especially more than any other industry, there's a lot of people searching for the same stuff, right? And everyone's trying to find the next best deal that Sequoia's in or Andreessen or first round. And it's a great way to do that. But ultimately, I think it's going to be important for us to withstand that pressure from the external markets. And by the way, this includes investors, LPs, right? Because they're going to have to find us a bucket for us. But effectively, we're not venture, but we're not private equity. We're squarely in the middle of that. And so that's going to withstand. That's going to require a lot of discipline for us to hold our conviction, and a lot of patience.
Mhm. Gotcha. No, I can totally relate with that. A lot of noise out there is too much. And of course, it's natural that FOMO can get built. Especially early on when you just started, you want to be in the good deals and all that. But really, the truth is, you need to stick to, what you stand out for.
Yeah,
And with this, Vijay, as you said, this is gonna be your last job, and this is what gonna be for the next decades to come. And you get to give a good example as well. The most successful people out there, the average age for them into that business is 44, 45 years. What's for you? What's the magical outcome that you hold for 81 collections moving forward?
yeah. I think ultimately we are a steward of capital. That is first and foremost the most important thing. And so ultimately a lot of folks entrusted us with their capital, and we take that responsibility very seriously. And we love working on our craft, right? Like you know this, but we work really long hours because these companies are hard, but we take it seriously.
Hmm.
Um, but ultimately, I do think it's very important that we help lead the way for innovation in these industries. I wholly believe, you think about what's going on, especially in America, but it's become such a consumption driven society. And effectively, it used to be that, the retail, the consumer would be next to the manufacturing plant and logistics. And through the last 30, 40, 50 years, we've distanced ourselves from consumption and production, right? Production, a lot of it's gone to India or to China. And we've kind of lost our art as a country on that, which is obviously a huge place where India can play a huge role. Obviously, other countries in Latin America or Mexico. But ultimately, you know, this is all more important than me and you and generally our startups, right? But there needs to be a movement to have a more stable balance in any country, in the world in general, right? There's such a consumption driven, we've forgotten how things get there. And that's why we need to innovate in services and manufacturing in the physical world. So not just does it represent an incredible financial opportunity that represents trillions of dollars of value that's locked up, but it also represents an incredible social opportunity because, again, I think, and by the way, I'm optimistic because I think we go through waves of this. And ultimately, I think if we innovate and produce incredible returns, there'll be systemic impact from that. So anyways, long story short, I think it's a team sport because ultimately we have one earth.
Yeah.
And, people in India do this or we do this and we're successful. Ultimately, we lift others up, we lift future generations up, and we lift a lot of our neighbors up. And ultimately, that is the underlying purpose, all in the name of producing incredible returns.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Doing good by, what's that phrase? I forgot. It's like you're you're making money, but by doing good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Like Shiva,
Yeah.
I honestly I love your story. Why I'm excited to spend time with you and why I think I invested as well is just that I feel like you're playing your card, right? You have this unique background. You came to the US, you played tennis, and then you came back, right? And right, the potential in India. And I think it's so exciting what you're doing, obviously for yourself and for me, but for the wider good. Because at the end of the day, there's such an efficient, productive ecosystem here of funding and lessons learned and mentorship. And there's no reason that needs to stay confined here. There's this amazing graph that I'm sure you've seen that I sent to everyone in the US. But if you look at GDP over the last 2,000 years, have you seen this graph? And you take it by 100% bar graph.
Mhm.
Effectively, it's India and China for 1,800 years is 70 or 60% of all global GDP. And then just literally this blip in the
Yeah.
last 100 years is when obviously the Western world is all taking over. But at the end of the day, we're going to have what? 3.5 billion people in India and China and all of these countries with a computer in their pocket and a lot of ambition. And the
Mhm.
only missing variable is mentorship. So again, I think you also play a role in this because you're obviously bridging these worlds. And we all, personally, my family and I, we've decided when this is all said and done, we're going to give a lot back to India. Um, but ultimately, I think you play an important role, and we all play this role in lifting the sea.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Vijen, as we discussed, and I think that was the initial uh, uh, connect between you and I because you are interested in India, and that's the new podcast series is about, where in fact I think there are stats I think the Indian diaspora just posted out. Think about what 16, 17. Of the Fortune 500 companies, the CEOs are Indian diasporas, and
Yeah,
almost 12-13% of unicorns in India, or not in India, in US are founded by diasporas,
that's right.
and a lot of you know employees at top companies are Indian diasporas. And
Yeah,
now I think the next phase would be folks would want to give back either through mentorship, through network, through capital. Vijay, what interests you about India? I know that you want to learn more about India.
yeah.
What's been the sense for you?
You know, uh, it's a good question, but ultimately, I'm always Indian, right? I love Chicago. I love America. But uh, one thing, as I think about my life and that conversation I had with my mom, right? Can you imagine, my mom, their family went from India to Uganda to London to Canada, then here. And so my parents, my grandparents picked up their life, and I get sentimental thinking about this, and started over 3 times, all in the name of the future, right? Not even for their benefit, for me. And so I completely empathize when I say to my mom, I'm going to quit this all and start over again. And we are so fortunate, all of us, to be able to stand on the shoulders of prior generations, right? And so whether that's Gandhiji and just all the sacrifices my family's made in this, there's no way this diaspora happens without leadership.
Yeah.
And I think about the next 100 years. Like there is a material chance that my grandkids are going back to India, right? And you think about the potential there, and obviously all the amazing infrastructure that's going on there, etc. Um, at the end of the day, I realize that I'm so fortunate to have this position of strength and luck. And it didn't just come from nowhere. It came from a lot of sacrifice.
Yeah.
And then just on a very personal note, there is no, my life completely changed when I was probably 13 or 14 and I went back to India, and you just see that, there's so many, we talk about being left out of the greatest economic period in global history. What about being left out of society? Right. And we just see so much of that in India. Um, and ultimately, these people are worthy. And so there's so much work to be done. And ultimately, I think I owe the responsibility. I think the diaspora does, you do, but we all have this responsibility to treat these other people and lift them up as well.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I just think this is one world. I do have a bias to India because of how much I've personally benefited my family from all the sacrifices that have been made. And ultimately, we have the responsibility to pay it forward for future generations that are coming out of India.
Got it. Love it, Vijen. Hoping for you to get involved in the Indian tech ecosystem in one way or the other. And thanks for backing me.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good starting point for you. And with this, Vijen, my co-pilot, he's getting restless.
I love it.
He wants to get in, and he's asking, what are you most obsessed about outside of work these days?
Yeah. So I'm a huge sports guy. So I actually, when I was in high school, another reason why I became an entrepreneur is because I lost a lot of weight by running, around 75 pounds. And ever since then, Shiva, I've never been able to stop moving. And so I'm a giant soccer nut. I actually played tennis for a while, but I was like, it's too individualistic. I need team sports.
Yeah.
And so I own a soccer team. I am a big Liverpool fan. Uh, I I love playing soccer, so I'll actually, even as I was building Tide Cleaners, I'd always put this meeting in my calendar on Fridays from like noon to 1:30, and I'd wake up at 5 a.m., start working, and then I'd go play soccer for an hour and a half and then come back to work. But ultimately, I absolutely love soccer. And then I've got two young kids. I've got an amazing wife and family. And so, at the end of the day, I also realized that, all of this success that I'm so fortunate to have had, and people around, and these entrepreneurs, it's all not worth it if it's just in isolation. I need to take care of my family. I need to take care of our community. It's all one piece, part of equilibrium. And so after this, I'll probably go read for a bit. But I like to have balance in life, and that means a lot to me.
Yeah. Talking about reading, seems like you
Yeah.
read a lot. Maybe one or two books, Vijay, that kind of changed the way you think about
Man.
life and work.
It's why I'm looking at my bookshelf. There's like 100 books there. It's not a book. I still continue. It comes up time and time again, but I'm sure you've read it because I just talk about sports, but I'm sure you read this story about the businessman and the fisherman. Have you read that?
Yeah. Hmm.
Right. Like that, just that always reminds me of, at the end of the day, we are, we are in such a fortunate position, right? To take care of people's capital and make it more. And that is obviously important, but I always say that within perspective. There's another book I love that doesn't get a lot of shout outs. It's called Heart, Smarts, Guts, and Luck. Have you ever heard of this?
I've not.
Okay, so it's not a very well-known book, but I absolutely love it. But what it says is that the four components and ingredients of entrepreneurship come back to these four things: heart, smarts, guts, and luck.
Mhm.
And ultimately, not just do you need all four of those, but you need to have a spike in one of those four. right? So for Richard Branson, he's a huge guts guy, right? To buy an airline and to, everything he's done is a major guts thing. Um, a couple other, like Jeff Bezos, is completely led by smarts, right? And intellectual rigor. And he was a former hedge fund guy. And so ultimately, it was really eye opening to me to figure out my own leadership style, and just that, everyone's entrepreneurial adventure will come in their own way. But ultimately, luck plays a huge part. And you can imagine, look what we're wearing now. I guess we're dressed nicer, but even then, it's barely dry cleaning. And so I think, the powers that be above, because I got my last check from P&G in March of 2020. And you can imagine we're having the dry clean volumes post COVID. And so ultimately, I think, we can work really hard, but luck can only has a big role. So anyways, that book is a good one. And I do read the occasional fiction every now and then too. So I do enjoy that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm gonna take a look at this book. Sounds
Okay.
very interesting, and totally agree with you. Luck plays a big, big role, definitely. And it's funny how luck can strike you, right? You just
100%.
don't know.
You think, I think often about the worst founder that bought Bitcoin in 2013, right? If that was a company, you would have been a legend, right?
Yeah,
And so at some point, some things, like, you can assess what I said, 80, 90% of my diligence is on team, but there's something different at some point. You have to appreciate there's 7 billion people, and they will will other things into existence that you cannot see.
yeah, yeah. And Vijayan, we know you as an entrepreneur, now as an investor. What do your friends know you for?
Oh, great. We have a good time. Uh, we like to have fun. A lot of making fun of each other. Um, yeah, generally, Monday through Friday is built in our egos. Saturday and Sunday is about tearing our egos down,
Okay.
and so we like to lay into each other, keep each other humble. Uh, I I think that's right. And then honestly, it's really nice to see our kids' friends become friends, and that's a whole new level of love that we get to see. Um, and generally also walking, right? Like, we're so lucky, and it's a beautiful time of the year right now here, and just going on walks and grabbing a drink is absolutely amazing. What a great way to spend a weekend and slow down a bit.
Yeah, yeah, love it. And you seems to be in great shape.
Yeah.
What's been your relationship with the health?
I appreciate that. So as I said, I lost a lot of weight. So,
Yeah.
I usually work out 6 days a week. Um, I'll do like 2, 3 days of cardio and a couple days of strength. Uh, and the other thing I love is EDM music. So I'll get to the Peloton
Mhm.
and enjoy that. Um, and all, this well as a tennis guy, but it all comes down to diet. And so ultimately, making sure we eat good meals. It's funny. One thing I can't stand is during fundraising, you end up, going out on dinners and all that. And like, I sometimes I like being at home and taking care of the diet. So, of course, all within moderation, but I appreciate that. But it goes to say, I'm sure you've had this too, where you meet, some elder folks who are so well to do, but they're massively obese or on their fifth marriage, and you're like, what's the point of money? If you don't have these other things nailed in your life. And so to me, there's no amount of money you can pay me to stop playing soccer or to
Mhm.
stop working out, because what's it all for?
Yeah, absolutely. I keep or let's put it this way. That you're aware of, you have the awareness around what's the point of having money if you don't have the health, right?
Yes.
And and yeah, for me, I've been fortunate that I picked up tennis very early on and pursued it. So tennis has become more of, or I would say, health has become more of an identity now.
Yeah.
And if I don't work out, so I hit the gym 6 days a week, and
Good.
if I don't go to the gym, I just feel incomplete.
Well, if you think about also what we're doing, uh, at some point, everyone has the same set of facts. Everyone's smart. So really, it's all about emotional tolerance. And you're not going to be able to build that if you don't take care of your mind, your body, your soul, right? And so ultimately, these things all have to come together. Otherwise, your judgment will deteriorate. And so, to me, it's not even personal interest. This is in the best stake for stakeholders as well.
Yeah.
They are incentivized to also see us have equilibrium in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and for me, the way I think about it, Vijay, so I'm an outsider, complete outsider. Tennis for first 25 years, suddenly into venture capital. I know that I'm probably one of the least smartest guy in the room. This these people around me are just so smart, but the edge that I have, at least in my mind, that I can outwork them, given
Yeah,
what I've done through tennis. So I make sure that my mind, my mental, my emotional, my physical health are at top,
good.
and that should give me an edge, or at least it'll help me to do things that I want to do. With this, Vijay, thank you so much for coming on the pod and really sharing your incredible journey you've had so far, and you are going to have an amazing journey moving forward as well. And thank you so much.
Shiva, thank you so much. Again, thank you for everything you're doing. Uh, I often say it's attitude that matters most because skills, they'll come and you've got it, but attitude can't be taught. And so I'm excited for your future, what you're doing for India's future. And I'm happy our worlds crossed and I can be a part of it.